We are live. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us at this Daily Maverick webinar. Today is a particularly wonderful day because I'm honored to be in the presence of greatness, and that greatness is Mr. Jeremy Maggs. Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us.
Sorry, you said the presence of greatness. Let me just let them in, okay? That's very kind of Rebecca.
That's a taste of the Maggs humor that you can expect and that you might be surprised by, because Jeremy, I think it's fair to say, and this isn't a word I'm making up, you use it in the book, that your public persona can often seem a little starchy, perhaps pompous, dare I say. And yet, as you will discover from Jeremy's book, he is in fact nothing of the kind. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm Rebecca Davis, Daily Maverick journalist, and we are here today to launch Jeremy Maggs' latest book, My Final Answer. And can I tell you, audience, lovely audience, I adored this book because it is so funny. We do not have enough humor in South African publishing, nearly enough, especially genuinely funny humor. And this book really has it all. I would describe it to spending an afternoon in a sunny courtyard with a bottle of wine and a delightful companion. If you don't enjoy it, you are dead inside. And I wish I had a copy of it to show you, but I don't, because I only have it on Kindle. Jeremy, you don't have a copy of it there, do you?
Don't be ridiculous, Rebecca. I forgot it at home.
Right, jolly good, pass the course. I can also tell you that if you are a Daily Maverick insider, which is of course a member of our wonderful community of readers who basically pay the bills to keep the lights on and to keep us running wonderful investigations and so forth. If you are a Daily Maverick insider, you get free delivery on this book anywhere in South Africa. You just have to click on the shop on the Daily Maverick website and make the plans accordingly. Right, further ado, on with the show. So Jeremy Maggs has such a light touch in his book, which I think I can call a memoir. Would you call it a memoir, Jeremy?
I'm very happy with the word memoir. It sounds, again, a bit pompous, doesn't it? But it's a book about my favorite subject, which is me. So, yes, it's a memoir.
He has such a light touch and such a very self-deprecating approach in his book that you can be in danger of overlooking the fact that Mr. Maggs has had a truly spectacular career in South African media, all driven by his passionate desire not to work at Nedbank, never to work at Nedbank, and culminating in his selection as the official face of talk in South Africa. Jeremy, the book is called My Final Answer, which of course is your catchphrase from the TV game show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, but actually you spend relatively little time on that aspect of your career. Is there any reason for that?
Rebecca, first of all, thank you very much indeed. And it is so great to be with you on this webinar and with the Daily Maverick audience. I am a huge fan, not only of the website, but also of the weekend newspaper as well. So let me get that out the way. You know, I never meant to go into the quiz business at all. And I do write in the book that I considered myself a serious journalist. I got a call from Anand Singh, the producer of the movie Long Walk to Freedom, and at that stage, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. He phoned me up one day. I'd just come off a morning television show at the SABC. He phoned me up and he said, look, I think you might be the right guy to do this. I had met him during my newspaper days. And I remember being absolutely insulted, in fact, affronted, Rebecca Davis. I said to him, Anand, I'm not interested. I'm a serious journalist. You want me to do a game show? Thank you very much indeed. He said, listen, I'm going to send you a cassette. Remember those, a video cassette? And he said, have a look at it and get back to me. I said, I shall. I immediately took my family off to Turkey. We were going on holiday, came back, put the video cassette in, and Rebecca, I realized within 7 seconds of looking at the British version of the show that I'd made a horrendous mistake, that this was something I wanted to do. I phoned him up. I groveled, I supplicated myself before him. I wept, I gnashed teeth. I did all of those things. I said, I'm really sorry. Please let me come and do the show. He said, fine. I knew you'd come round. The rest is history.
The rest is history. And your personal history, of course, is that, serendipitously enough, you've always been a bit of a trivia buff. I mean, there's some very daring stories of the young, extremely nerdish Jeremy Maggs sort of upstaging his teachers with his arcane facts.
Don't you make fun of me, Rebecca Davis. I was in the Eagles quiz team when I was in primary school, and I led our team of nerds, as you put it, to a glorious victory, defeating the Hawks house by a single point. That was the start of my career into the quiz business. This is a very important aspect of my life. Do not devalue that currency.
And, your book takes us from that nerdish yet glorious childhood onwards. So let's take it sort of chronologically, if we can. One of the aspects I was struck by, Jeremy, that you were describing your childhood and upbringing, obviously, in what was then apartheid South Africa. A necessary reminder how depressing, actually, a lot of that environment was, particularly in terms of the media offerings at the time.
So, Rebecca, you're absolutely right. And I talk about the media that I was exposed to. Is I was an inveterate radio listener. And at some point, we might get onto a comparison between radio and television and what I prefer. It will always be radio. There's an intimacy, there's a magic about radio. But I was exposed to Springbok radio, and maybe you were either in my household an Argus reader or a SAN reader, South African Associated Newspapers. Argus at the time was the Star newspaper. How things have changed for that title, we don't necessarily need to go there. But my father always used to bring the Star home, and it was a very sanitized version, Rebecca, of what was happening in South Africa at the time. My lived reality is I lived a privileged, white, middle-class suburban existence in northern Johannesburg. I went to a school where I was given a Christian national education. There's nothing I can do about changing it, but I was exposed to people at school, and I would mention one person in particular, a history teacher, who I still am in touch with to this day. Her name is Sue Kricher, one of the finest people I have ever had the privilege of knowing. And she was able to, I hate using the word conscientize, but I'm going to use it anyway because I can't think of a better one. She was able to bring a small coterie of people around to right-minded thinking. But you're absolutely right. Growing up at that time, full of privilege, but a very sheltered and cocooned existence.
And you describe your compulsory military service as horrific. That's the term you use. And indeed, it sounds horrific, although I must say, you did everything in your power to turn it to your your special talents and needs, shall we say.
So, Rebecca, let me start off with my father, God bless him, he died 18 months ago. He was 94 years old. And he came from that background where it was a good thing to serve in uniform. He had served during the Second World War. Might I say, a very, as they say, cushy billet. He was on a crash boat off the coast of Durban. I don't think that there was an enormous amount of work for him to do at the time, but he exhorted my brother and myself to go into the army, and we did, and it was miserable. I had just come back from an exchange scholarship in the United States of America. I was uppity, I was full of myself, I was arrogant, and perhaps that was the start of when I started to become really pompous, but we don't need to use that word again. Went into the army, and I was literally the fish without water. I was unable to march properly. I was terrified of shooting. Eventually, I was sent to, as they said, the border in Namibia, on the border of Namibia and Angola. I was shunted into the kitchen, and my job was to order food. I made a horrendous mistake one day, over-ordering a certain amount of food and under-ordering it on the other. Long story short is that for 7 or 8 days, a battalion of men lived on nothing but sweet corn. And I was hunted. It became wild and atavistic. At one point, I really thought that they were going to kill me. But I hid.
Jeremy,
They didn't.
that was the beginning. That was the beginning of a series of frightful mathematical errors in your career. We'll get on to some of the. I particularly liked your description of yourself as being flabby effete. This is what I mean about Jeremy's self-deprecating style. You sort of fall into journalism, as many of us do, and there's many aspects of your kind of theories of the media and journalism that I wholeheartedly endorse. One of them is that journalism is not something that you can study. Talk us through your thoughts on that.
So, Rebecca, I think you're right, and I'm battling to remember who told it to me, but I do give credit to the former editor of Business Day and the Financial Mail, Peter Bruce, who said, you can't study journalism, but what you can study is you can study history, so you have context, and you can study economics, so you have a sense of what is shaping the world. And I subscribe to that view. The other view I subscribe to is that you can only get into this business of journalism if you are curious. You have to have an innate, inherent curiosity all the time. As I'm talking to you right now, I am curious and I'm turning my head around to see the books on your shelf behind you.
Don't. It's all 50 Shades of Grey, basically. All of it. Just 50 Shades and all the sequels.
Good books. I'd like to write one myself. And the other thing, Rebecca, is you've got to read, man. We don't read enough. And if I can just loop this question, when I was on Millionaire, I remember looking at an interview with a Brit who had won, I don't know, £16,000 or £32,000 or whatever. And he was a lorry driver. And they said to him, what's the secret of your success? And in a very broad Manchester accent, which I will not try to emulate, he turned around and he said, I read every day. I read the newspapers. He said, I might be a lorry driver, but I still read. And I don't think we read enough in this country. So, people say to me, people come up to me, and I guess you all the time, because we've been in this business for ages, and they say, well, I want to be in journalism. What do I need to do? One word, man, just read. Keep reading.
Well, you also say that we get into this business for two reasons. One, we like to write, and two, we can't do maths. Again, the truest words ever spoke. You give an example of you as a kind of rookie cadet journalist sent to, or tasked with rather, tallying matric results, this historic rivalry between these two schools. Tell us a bit about that.
So, first of all, to the tens of thousands of people that are watching this webinar in the Eastern Cape today, and in particularly in Port Elizabeth or Gqeberha, I want to apologize again. And even though this happened a good 30-odd years ago, I was a cadet reporter on the Eastern Province Herald, as it was at the time, now the Herald. And there was a great rivalry between two schools, Grey and Theodore Herzl. And every year, one school always won, and I was given the task of tallying up the matric results. And I made a mistake. And it was literally simple arithmetic. Literally taking a piece of paper and running your finger down. And there weren't that many distinctions anyway. But I got it wrong. And I triumphantly proclaimed to the newspaper that this particular school had won over the other school. And it was a splash headline on the front page of the newspaper the following day. Well, I'd got it wrong. And I remember walking into the newsroom the next day, and there was a crusty old assistant editor who was smoking. You could still smoke in newsrooms at that time. And he threw a calculator at me. And because I was a particularly poor person with ball skills, it hit me. And I was then made to offer restitution. And I had to answer the phone for the rest of the day to angry parents apologizing that I had got it wrong. I would once again like to apologize to Grey High School and to Theodore Herzl, both fine educational institutions. I'm sorry I got it wrong. It will never happen again.
We have that on record now, Jeremy. You know, reading about your kind of exploits and adventures in your early days of journalism, which was what, in the 80s?
Well, no, yeah, round about there, yeah.
Yeah, round about there. It struck me how very different the media industry is these days. And I mean, that's an obvious point to make in terms of social media and the rest of it, but also just in terms of what you could get away with, Jeremy. So, for instance, you tell the story about impersonating someone with HIV, actually with, you know, kind of devastating results. Must have been a cracker of a story. One of those things that you could just never do these days, could you?
So you're right. So I think I worked on a Sunday newspaper at that time. I was working for the Sunday Tribune. Arch rival at the Times was the Sunday Times. And this was a little newspaper that really punched above its weight. And we had a very accomplished news editor who is still a column writer, a guy called William Saunderson Mayer, who writes acerbically and amusingly about politics in South Africa. And HIV at that time, HIV/AIDS, was not an issue in South Africa, but it was starting to become one. And this was a copy of a story that the Sun newspaper had done in Britain. They'd done exactly the same thing. And I was made up and I was told to go impersonate someone who had HIV, who was HIV positive. I remember trying to check into a hotel, trying to have a haircut, trying to have a meal, trying to fit a bathing suit on if memory serves correctly. And people were aware of it, but they were very cruel and dismissive. Is it the kind of journalism that we should be practicing today? I don't know, to be honest with you. It was participatory. I've done a lot of participatory journalism in my life before. You know, we've all grown up on the Hunter S. Thompsons of the world at some point. But I think it got the message home, that I think that it told people that this was an issue and that it was also something that should not be discriminated against. And it was told in a very visual way. As I say, is that kind of journalism still relevant today? You must make up your own mind. I don't know.
You know, but you say in the book, and I think rightly, that we've become terribly kind of po-faced about what is and isn't permitted in media. And you give the example of my dear colleague Marianne Tam and her excursion to Camps Bay to dig in dustbins regarding the EFF. What were your thoughts on that?
So, first of all, I am a massive fan of Marianne. I think I love the way she writes, and I think that she is a roll-up-your-sleeves kind of journalist who did exactly what she should have done. I think it exposed hypocrisy at the time, and I think she got her hands literally dirty. I think I also write in the book that, and I'm not going to name the person, but it was some buffoon of a senior media person, editor, publisher, whatever. And I remember getting a call from him, and he said something along the lines of, "You, Mr. Maggs, as a media commentator, need to call this woman out." And I told him very politely to foxtrot Oscar, because I had absolutely no intention of doing it, because that's the kind of journalism that I think we should be doing more of and not less of. As long as you don't go through my rubbish bin, Marianne Tam, at the end of a weekend, because it would be horrific.
Foxtrot Oscar, by the way, everyone, means fuck off. I'm enjoying the comments in the chat section, and please do keep making comments and any questions you want me to put to Jeremy. I see some have already come in, and we definitely will take them before the session ends, so do not fear about that. Keep them coming and we'll round them all up at the end. A question you say in your book that you're often asked, and I can imagine so, your favorite interviewees, because you've interviewed, as you mentioned, everyone from Tony Blair to the Archbishop of Canterbury. Actually, that's not a very good diversity. That's select
that wasn't a great pivot either, was it?
It wasn't really, no, from one middle-aged white English man to another. Your two favorite interviews?
Oh, Rebecca, this is such an unreasonable question that you ask me because it's not fair. I tell you who I've really enjoyed talking to. I enjoy being in conversation with people who have a blip on the radar screen and then they disappear. People who are trying to make a contribution. People who have failed in the past and have said something or have made one small difference. If I look back, probably my favorite interview of all time, and I can't even remember the guy's name. It was some hapless individual in KwaZulu-Natal, and he invented or claimed to have invented the world's first inflatable veldskoen. And it was an abortion. It really was. It was ridiculous. But I remember talking to this man and his passion for what he was doing, the fact that he was going to create jobs for people. He was going to export it internationally. He was enthusiastic. He was plugged in. Those are the interviews that I like doing. You and I are both in this business. We can see the pomp and the bullshit and the spin and all of that a mile away. And you've got to do it, but it's not those kind of interviews I like. It's with the eccentrics. I love interviewing eccentric people. I think there's a book in it, maybe. I'm not sure. Do you want to co-write it?
I would absolutely love to. I think one of my best interviews was with a doomsday prepper. I mean, I know exactly what you mean. These are the interviews that stick in your mind. This guy who was preparing very, very conscientiously for the end of the world as we know it, except we normies are not preparing for it. And you're right, Jeremy. Those are
those are the best.
That stick with you. They are. I wanted to ask you as well, because, in your most recent role on ENCA as a news anchor, you were very frequently in the position of putting politicians through their paces. I mean, I'm cautious to even ask you this, but are there any current politicians for whom you maintain an enduring respect at the moment of the crop?
All right. So what I'm going to say now is I don't want this to become the headline of the interview.
I mean, don't flatter yourself, Jeremy.
But what the politician that you've got to bring your A game to, the politician that you have to really prepare hard for, is Helen Zille. I have interviewed her on a number of occasions, and she listens, and she's always prepared for a fight, and she doesn't suffer fools. Now, I know that she has her many detractors and supporters. That's not my interest. But from a pure interview perspective, to sit down with her, and it's happened on many occasions, if you're not prepped, then you're not going to succeed. And it's another lesson in journalism that I was given by a radio mentor, a guy called Stan Katz, who was very significant in my days at 702. And it's the old adage, for every hour that you're on air, you need to put an hour's preparation in. Again, I don't think that happens enough in the media. For instance, Rebecca, I know that our webinar now is going to go on for an hour. I know that you've done a good hour's preparation for this, and it shows.
More than that, Jeremy.
More
I
than
read
that.
terribly slowly. I started reading 3 years ago, in fact. On the note of reading, actually, I wanted to read an excerpt from Jeremy's book, which I think will give you a taste of the humor which so delighted me. This is Jeremy talking about the difficulty of going on air with the right quantity and kind of aesthetic of makeup, which is obviously quite difficult. Although one would say perhaps not with a man of Jeremy's majestic appearance. This is what he writes. There are two types of makeup artists. Those who believe all one needs is a light dusting of powder to hide any shine. I work well with these individuals and then inevitably end up getting a small Christmas present. Then there are those who have a secret desire to be on pioneering reconstructive surgery team and end up turning you into a drag queen. I struggle to work with this group, and they normally get a perfunctory nod and a hard stare come Yuletide. Jeremy, I think it's the word Yuletide in that sentence that really did me over. Let's get into ye old radio versus TV debate.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the benefits of radio, of course, is that you very infrequently have to be wearing makeup.
So, Rebecca, I was very lucky. As I said to you at the beginning of our conversation, I was one of those kids that was brought up on Springbok radio. And again, that old cliche of theatre of the mind. And it was done so well. And I always wanted to be on, so you used the word Yuletide. I also wanted to be on I wanted to be on the wireless, as my father used to call it. Mm-hmm. I was very lucky to find a gap at 702 when it was still a top 40 music station on an AM frequency many years ago. I was interviewed by again one of my mentors in the business, the news editor Chris Gibbons. I was given an opportunity to get on air, and in those days it took a long time to get on air. You would think that you were just about ready, and then you would be told, no, you're still not there yet. But eventually I was given the opportunity to read the 5 a.m. news. I remember arriving at the station probably 9 o'clock the previous evening. I was in such a state. Finally, it was my opportunity to read the 5 o'clock news, 5 a.m. And it was a 3-minute bulletin, which I got through in just over 60 seconds. My shirt, Rebecca, was sticking to my back. Perspiration was pouring down my forehead. And I remember walking back to the newsroom, and my brother, the swine that he is, phoned me up and said, Jeremy, you did a fantastic job. And if there's ever an opportunity for you to call horse racing a turpentine, I think you've got the job. But that's how I got into radio. Yep.
Jeremy, I love it when, kind of elder statesmen of the industry, such as yourself, will admit to their boo-boos. And that's
I'm just looking for that elder statesman again. The room is empty.
It's you, monsieur. I love it when such figures will admit to their boo-boos. And throughout the book, you're very frank and candid about the mistakes you've made on air and off it. I'd love it if you could share what was obviously quite a difficult moment at the time, but in particular the faux pas at Mandela's Memorial.
So, Rebecca, it was difficult at the best of times to do something like that. We had got there. I was working with Nikiwe Bekicha, who is a dear friend. And by the way, if she is watching this webinar, next week, Good for Friday, lunch is on me. We were sitting together, and we had done, 12 hours on air, and it was exhausting. And we then were in the final stretch of the broadcast. And I made reference to Jacob Zuma's memorial. And as I'm talking to you, the horror is starting to come back to me. We were talking over pictures, as we say in the TV business, and I remember Nikiwe looking at me and mouthing an expletive that didn't go out on air, and there was nothing I could do about it. A couple of weeks later, Justice Malala, who is a fine columnist and radio and TV presenter, came up to me and he said, I think you might be way ahead of us. You called it, and remember it. Rebecca, you make mistakes all the time in this business. I have made poor decisions as an editor. I've made good decisions as an editor. You have to live with them. The only thing I would say about this business is that you're making decisions so often and so quickly all the time. I reckon if you're getting, I don't know, 80, 85% of your decisions right, you're doing a good job. You're going to make mistakes. I live with them, and I just think it adds to the scars on your back. I made a real idiot of myself over that Mandela Memorial escapade. Mercifully, there wasn't the level of social media that exists now. I would have been destroyed and pilloried, I'm sure, had it existed to the point that it exists now. But hey, you know what? The news cycle moves on, doesn't it?
It does. And if it makes you feel better, I went on Cape Talk at the same time and referred to Mandela's funeral as Mandela's wedding. Is that better or worse than calling it Zuma's memorial? I don't know.
It is what it is. Yeah.
You make some serious points, of course, in the book as well. I mean, a lot of serious points, actually. It's written with a great deal of insight. And one of them is around the 2010 World Cup. You suggest that the South African media actually really fell short of its responsibilities at that time in failing
I think
to
we did. I absolutely think we did. And it took Ray Hartley a couple of years later to pull that all together in his book, and the title escapes me, Ray, I'm sorry, when he exposed the levels of malfeasance and corruption and ineptitude that went into putting an event like this, because we were utterly seduced by it. Right. I remember, and I write about it in the book, you know, at the TV station, we had the opportunity of either going to the opening game and not working, or going to the closing and working. And I got to the opening game, and it was exhilarating. It was one of the most astonishing. It was a surreal event. I mean, and I think that all of us in the media, we were prepared to let the big issues. We gave those big issues a pass. And I don't think that we should have done that. But, you know, there's a lesson, is that, you know, don't get too involved in the excitement sometimes. We have a job in this business of standing back dispassionately and being neutral and critical observers. Yeah, I think we failed. Right.
I love the story of you being at that first opening match, of course, and that phenomenal goal by Chabalala, and I can't remember who it was, your colleague sitting next to you, grabbing you and yelling, "Maxie, we're going to do it! We're going to win the fucking World Cup!"
So, Rebecca, I'm not going to name him, because he is a kind of a friend stroke acquaintance. But I just remember, and he is a motivational speaker by profession. And I remember him grabbing me, and he's a very big man. And I just remember this soupy armpit that I was pulled into. And I just thought to myself, you know, settle yourself. It's only the start. But again, there's another example of someone that was completely and utterly seduced by the moment. Yeah, you know, and I think I also try to make the comparison that if you drive from Sandton to OR Tambo, on the way there are a couple of memorials or artwork or whatever you want to call them that were all gussied up and painted and ready to go before the event, and they're still there, but they've fallen into this rusty state of disrepair. And I think it's a very good metaphor for a squandered opportunity, because I don't think we used the legacy to the best possible advantage. It was a one-off thing, and I think we moved on, and more's the pity.
And speaking of media reneging on responsibilities, Jeremy, you make a similar comment when it comes to the Marikana massacre, or rather you suggest that if we had done our jobs better in advance, could things be different? I mean, you don't state it, you ask the question. Yeah,
I do ask the question, and Rebecca, I know, and again, I'm going to wade into territory here which I'm not that familiar with, because a lot of my observations were based on supposition at the time. But I just got the sense, certainly from people that I've spoken to subsequently, that all the aspects of a disaster or tragedy were starting to boil weeks before the actual event itself. And I think that we collectively were reporting it but perhaps we weren't reporting the gravitas of what was happening. I'm not for one moment suggesting that we could have foreseen something like that, but I think that we could have been a little bit more robust in our interrogation of the issues that led up to that event itself. And maybe in one way or another, it kind of might have, could have cauterized it. I don't know. But I just think, again, it's another lesson in the media that you've got to keep your eye on something and you've got to watch it like a squall building. And I don't think we did a good enough job in that respect.
It's a sobering thought. Let's have a less sobering thought. You are just on the verge of taking up your Who Wants to Be a Millionaire position, and you meet the now late Prince Philip. Take us through that.
We're not friends. We were never friends. I'm going to state that for the record. I was invited to an event when Her Majesty came to South Africa, and I was part of a reception committee. Rebecca, I'm going to be very honest with you. I was keen to see her and maybe bow, but I was also interested in a very fine selection of canapes that the British High Commission had put on, and I could spot them in the distance. I'm just going to put that on the record. She walked past. I was astounded by how small she was and how porcelain her skin looked, because, as you know, I'm an expert in makeup. And then Prince Philip followed her a couple of paces behind, and he was introduced, or I was introduced to him as the South African presenter of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And he looked at me up and down, as he did, and he made a vile remark about how nonsensical it was, that it added no value to culture, that I was wasting my time. And then he asked me an impossibly difficult question about the Mbeki administration's approach to some sort of environmental policy. I had no words. I didn't know what to say. And he looked at me and he obviously thought, who is this blithering moron? And he moved on. The canapes, though, on the other hand, were excellent.
I'm very delighted to hear that. It's so nice to encounter someone who's actually had one of those, one of those very distressing meetings with Prince Philip. I think you can take that as a badge of honor, Jeremy. So I know that a lot of our audience is going to be interested in Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, which was really, I think you would agree that it was the kind of television event, because we still had event television in those days, which catapulted you into becoming a household name. I was interested to read the kind of mechanisms you put in place, not you, but the producers in the studio, in order to make things harder for contestants.
Well, Rebecca, R1 million now and then was a lot of money. And we had to make sure that there was an environment which was conducive to good entertainment, but would also make the contestants sweat just a little bit. It was important. So what we might or might not have done is to be a little slow when a contestant wanted water, because we all know an adrenaline rush leads to a very dry mouth. And there is nothing nicer than watching a person struggle intellectually with a dry mouth and licking their lips so it makes them look like a reptile. We would have two very bright spotlights on their face, which would put me as the presenter, not quite in silhouette, but certainly they would need to look closely at me. We would play that music, which the show became synonymous with, which also replicated a heart rate under pressure. We would play that from a speaker positioned at their face at the bottom of the podium in front of which they were sitting. So we would just try to make things as difficult as possible. And it was always I was always impressed with the people that were able to factor that out, focus on the job at hand, and also be prepared to take big risks, because it was a laddered game and you could walk away at certain points with an amount of money, but as you got higher, you could lose more money. And, you know, the two people that did well, one person won R1 million, another person won 500,000 Rand. They were risk takers. But it was a great time in my life. The only thing I bemoan, and I'm far too old to do it now, but I think that we need another quiz show on television. I think that people enjoy them. Again, it comes back to my point about curiosity and reading. But I think the secret of this book and this game show, and I mention it in the book, was something called shoutability. Is that people could sit and shout at a contestant at home because they knew the answer, and the poor hapless individual with a bright light in their face didn't understand or didn't know the answer. That was the interactivity at the time. That's why I think it worked.
I was interested to say that you were initially, well, perhaps throughout, concerned and perhaps depressed by the fact that so many contestants just failed to make it past the initial rounds, that there seemed to be like a real problem with...
Yeah, back to my point about reading, Rebecca, is that it would have been... So we were disappointed for two reasons. So I also write in the book that the one reason was that there was never R1 million that was waiting in a suitcase to be, you know, perhaps that suitcase would have been stored at a dairy farm in the Free State, for instance. I don't know. But there was never R1 million in cash. What it was, effectively, was an insurance policy. And actuarially, it had been worked out that it would have been ideal had we had a winner in season 2 or season 3. But we had a winner in season 1. What does that mean? Well, the insurance policy premiums increased as a result. So while there was a huge celebration in front of the camera when there was R1 million winner, behind the scenes, I can tell you there was a degree of consternation as calls were being made to insurance brokers to see what was going to happen. But the people, I would have liked more risk to have been taken, but so be it.
There's a brilliant question here from Fran Gebhard, which I too want to know, which is, were there ever any frauds in the South African version? I just watched an excellent documentary about the Coffin Major. It wasn't a documentary; it's a series. It's a great one.
It isn't. I think it's got the actor, not Charlie Sheen, Martin Sheen, one of the Sheens. It's brilliant. No is the answer to that, unless it happened and no one knew about it.
Right.
All I want to say is that I never heard any suspicious coughing on set.
Right. And you don't believe that people were also gaming the system in the way they describe in the English one in order to get into the fastest fingers first process?
You know, Rebecca, comes back to my maths ability. So when you use words like gaming the system, I have no idea what you're saying. You know what? I would hope not. There was never any sense of impropriety that was certainly communicated to me. And I would like to think that we were as pure, Rebecca Davis, as the driven snow.
Excellent. Dennis Bailey has asked this question twice, so I can only assume it is a matter of some import to him. And it is, how old are you, Jeremy?
So I've just turned 40.
Excellent. Super. I would have guessed as much. He says
How can you ask me a question like that?
He says you're much too young to write a memoir. It was actually
I've just turned 60.
And I have to ask you this as well, because it has come up several times, and it is to do with the circumstances of your much lamented departure from ENCA. Is there anything you can tell us about that and what you're working on at the moment?
So, Rebecca, first of all, I expected the question to come, and let me be perfectly frank about it. I was the opening face and voice on ENCA when it launched. I was thrilled to be part of a pioneering project in South African media, and I was there for 11 years. I had got to the point where I felt I had overstayed my welcome. And I write extensively about it in the book. I had a year as the acting editor-in-chief. Dropped many balls there, and if you want to read the frank admissions that I make, it's in the book. I opted to stay on for another year behind the camera, and I just started to get the feeling that I'd overstayed my welcome, that I was preventing other people perhaps from pursuing an on-air career. There were many conspiracy theories about why I'd left. My favorite is that I'd got into an argument with someone and I had thrown baked goods at them. If you know me, by the way, I would never throw baked goods. I would eat the baked goods.
I should also interject, Jeremy, and say that you confess in your memoir to once throwing a keyboard, a computer keyboard.
I did throw a keyboard at a very dear friend of mine. Her name was Debbie Meyer. The story has become apocryphal because I've heard people say that I threw a screen at her, that I actually threw her out the window. It's not true. I threw a keyboard at her. But just to finish the ENCA loop, it was time for me to go. I am busy with 2 other projects at the moment, and I figured, and to be serious for a second, I turned 60 in February, and I realized that if I didn't do the 2 things I wanted to do now, I would suddenly be 63, then 65, then retired, and then I would, I don't know, walk my dog more. So it was time for me to move on. There's no rancor. There is no animosity. I wish the station well. I think 24-hour television news is a difficult thing to do. It's a beast that constantly needs feeding, but my time had come and I have moved on.
Fair enough.
Was that a reasonable answer?
No, I think it absolutely was. Question here from Marianne, who I know is at the University of Stellenbosch Journalism Department. She says she is not going to ask you to give career advice for her students. Fair enough, because there really is none we can give at this stage. What I would like to know is whether you can recommend ways in which we can improve their general knowledge beyond imploring them to read, and beyond, I imagine, asking them to look up old episodes of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire on YouTube.
How do you, I don't know, play Trivial Pursuit more? Have more. By the way, I'm very good at Trivial Pursuit. Well, I used to play for money. I think it's also taking a more Socratic approach when it comes to teaching, is that maybe you need to have more vigorous and robust conversations in the classroom itself. But my default position, and it's a good one, is that I would encourage people. And when I talk about reading, by the way, I'm not just talking about reading the Daily Maverick every day, or the Financial Mail, or the Times of London, whatever the case is. Rebecca, you made a joke about 50 Shades of Grey and the books behind you. It's also reading that kind of stuff. So I love reading thrillers. I love reading history and biographies and philosophy and sport, as much stuff as I can get. That's what I would suggest that your students do. And I was also very lucky to be an exchange student in high school in the United States of America when I was a teenager. And the one thing that's always stuck with me was that thing you always read about it in the Archie comics, the pop quiz. Have more pop quizzes for your students. There you go. Best advice I can give. Fantastic.
Andrew Wright would like to know, any comment about the process of news broadcasters, and I think journalists in general, actually, becoming celebrities? So, when you become the news.
It's inevitable, isn't it? I mean, if you look at CNN, for instance, you look at someone like Anderson Cooper, he's a bona fide celebrity. I think it comes with the job. I think the more you're in front of a camera or a radio microphone, it's inevitable that you're going to become a celebrity. My advice to any young broadcaster, particularly someone who's going to go into television, is that you're not going into it because you want to be on TV. Television particularly is a platform of delivery. And also, for goodness sake, I always joke and say that broadcasters have 2 things in common. One is we love the sound of our own voice. The other is we have giant egos. It's true, but what I have tried to do, I haven't always been successful because we all like the adoration, but just try and ground yourself, be a little bit more centered, leave the ego at the door if you can.
Yeah, Easier said than done, I think.
Just,
Jeremy, somebody has asked, sorry, let me find their name. That's very rude of me. Morton Darley, did you enjoy the breakfast show on SABC?
I love the breakfast show. I did a program called AM Today. I worked with one of the finest broadcasters, a woman called Nothemba Madumo. Also a couple of names from the past, Alex J, Martin Bailey. It was a marvelous program to do. There were lots of hijinks. We had fun. And I think that the show in many ways was almost ahead of its time because it was co-anchored in 3 cities live, and I think we ran 4 hours a day. It was a fun time, but I must also confess that I don't miss those very early morning wake-up calls, particularly in TV, where you've got to wake up. Then, Rebecca Davis, you are subject to more makeup when you walk in.
Yes.
What's the secret to makeup? Less is more.
Less is more. Jeremy, I wanted to ask you this regarding your show, Mags on Media. You mentioned in the book, and I honestly couldn't tell if you were being sarcastic or not, that you are a genuine 100% fanboy of the advertising industry.
Love the advertising industry. Rebecca, seriously, I have the utmost admiration for a group of people who can sit around a table, who can come up with a compelling insight about a tampon brand or a washing powder or a spark plug, turn that into something which is amusing and interesting, is a call to action, and then results in some kind of success. I have followed and reported and continue to do so for the Financial Mail. I write about the advertising industry. I have still not unlocked what makes or the kernel of what a great creative idea is and how people reach that particular point. I live in awe of the ad industry. I think that I think it's a hard-working industry, but certainly not sarcastic. And I'm a frustrated creative director. In another life, I think I would like to have gone into advertising.
What's your favorite ad?
Of all time. There's an ad for an energy drink. It was a German energy drink. And again, I can't quite put my finger on the title, but it's a picture of a car, or it's a sequence of a car rounding gentle bends, and you're seduced by this music. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this screaming banshee appears. And the payoff line is something about that's what our energy drink does to you, because I've watched it with people, and as this banshee leaps up, everyone leaps back. And I love that ad. I'm told it's a really crap ad by purists in the ad industry, but I don't really care what they say. Why? Because I'm 60. I can afford not to care.
William Bird wants to know, yes, Jeremy loves advertisers, but he also made time for some of the rights groups. What I meant, does Jeremy have hope for our news media and its sustainability?
You know, William, you're a good friend. He is with Media Monitoring Africa, and Mags on Media didn't only report on the advertising industry, but also on media issues generally. You know, I do have hope, and I mention it in the book. I talk about important news organizations like Ground Up, like the Daily Vox, like the Daily Maverick, people that are really doing hard, pioneering journalism in an environment which is always contested, is always difficult, and there are always going to be detractors. But fundamentally, I believe that there is a spirit that exists in this industry. There's a spirit to dig out the truth, whether you have to go into rubbish bins or not. And I think that there is a sense of collegiality, cooperation these days. None of the Gupta leaks success would have been achieved without cooperation in the media, and I think that it continues to play an important role. My only plea is that the hard work continues. That's
are you
all I can
done?
say.
Are you done with journalism?
No, not at all. I'm busy with a new news project, and I have signed, Rebecca, NDAs to the point where if I say anything, a team of savage lawyers who are standing just behind me will leap in and grab me. So I'm busy with that. And then I'm involved in a small startup business called Bold. It's a part of the Brave advertising group. And I'm trying to do some high-level communication skills training to the so-called C-suite. And I'm already overwhelmed with work in that respect. So as I said to you, I wanted to do different things. I'm doing those two different things. But, time for me to move on from the TV camera.
Important question from Alfred Mboyane. Since you've admitted to being 60, have you had your jab?
Now, I'm a bit concerned about this. And I'm going to be, and I'm glad, Alfred, you asked this question. No, I haven't. And I'm concerned because I've done all the right things. I have registered. I've also registered with the medical aid, and I'm waiting. I also know that there are lots of walk-ins to the medical aid. I don't think that's right. I think the system needs to work. I am waiting. Here's my cell phone. I am waiting for my SMS to say, Jeremy, your jab is ready. Come and have it, and there's a cup of tea and a biscuit for you as well. That hasn't happened yet. I'm concerned about the slow pace of vaccination, but I'm certainly not one of those people that are going to jump the queue. I think that's wrong. There's a bit of British in me in that respect, is that you stand in an orderly line and you wait until you're called. I'm still waiting.
I need to tell you, I don't think you get the cup of tea and the biscuit, but.
Oh, this is not blood donation, is it?
It's not. In other respects, a wonderful answer. I was kind of hoping you were going to go all Chief Justice on us and rant about how you would never have the vaccine because it would change your DNA. Let me just check that we've rounded up all the questions that we can here. Let's have a look here. Oh, Mark Serpentine wants to know, Jeremy, did you have any voice training? You do have a magnificent timbre to your tone. That last bit was me, not Mark.
So, Mark, thank you very much indeed. No, I don't. It is, and thank you for saying that, because I think that you would ask any broadcaster, maybe there are a few exceptions, and they all hate listening to themselves or looking at themselves. I'm one of them. But I appreciate the accolade, but absolutely not. Because remember, I was never supposed to go into journalism because my father wanted me to go into the bank. Because he was a lifer at Nedbank. I make a point in the book. He was so old, I think he knew Ned. That's
very good.
And he said to me, by the time you're 40, you can be the branch manager at Edenvale. I don't know why he chose Edenvale. And I am just so lucky that I had a voice that enabled me to go into the media, because I would have been terrible at banking.
I don't know, Jeremy. Maybe we could have avoided the whole 2008 financial crisis if you'd chosen another path.
Yeah,
ladies
with my
and gentlemen,
arithmetic.
Thank you very much for joining us. Just to repeat, if you are a Daily Maverick Insider, you can get your copy of Jeremy Maggs' My Final Answer directly from our shop with free delivery anywhere in South Africa. If you are not, you can still go to any good bookshop and pick up a copy. I really urge you to do so. It would also make a wonderful friend. A present, but also a friend. If you are lonely, it is like having a little friend there. It's a wonderful read. It's hilarious. It's insightful. My Final Answer by Jeremy Maggs. And Jeremy, thank you so much for making time for us today. I hope that you'll stick around afterwards just to read some of these lovely comments, people saying how much they miss you as a broadcaster on ENCA. And I do hope that we'll get to see more of you in the future as well.
Rebecca, thank you very much indeed. And to the audience, I'm very, very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you and good day.